Ambassador Elena Vance stood in the center of the Galactic Concord chamber and felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon her. She had waited for this moment for 3 years, and humanity had waited for 43. The chamber was massive beyond imagination, carved from living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. 12 elevated platforms surrounded the central floor where Elena stood alone, and on each platform sat the representatives of the elder species who ruled the galaxy. High Arbiter Velketh of the Sithrani rose from his seat. His tall gray form moved with the slow grace of a species that had never known fear, and his 4 eyes studied Elena like she was an insect under glass. "We have reached our decision," he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, "regarding the petition of the human species for full membership in the Galactic Council." Elena kept her face calm. She had practiced this moment in the mirror 100 times, preparing for triumph, but something in the Arbiter's tone made her stomach twist with sudden worry. "For 43 of your years, humanity has held provisional status," Velketh continued. "This is the longest evaluation period in our recorded history, and we have studied your species with great care." Around the chamber, the other elder species shifted in their seats. The massive Krellian delegate scratched at his stone-like skin. The ethereal Voidborn flickered with nervous light, and the insectoid Moravtsi clicked their mandibles in what Elena had learned was anticipation. "We have observed your rapid technological advancement," the Arbiter said. "We have noted your expansion to 17 colony worlds. We have watched your integration into galactic commerce with growing concern." Concern, that word hit Elena like a physical blow, and she felt the first real spike of fear shoot through her heart. "The Council has therefore voted unanimously," Velketh declared, and his 4 eyes seemed to glow with cold certainty, "to implement Resolution 7012. A holographic display appeared in the air before Elena, filled with dense alien text that her neural implants struggled to translate. The words that came through made her blood run cold. "Humanity is hereby permanently barred from membership in the Galactic Council," the Arbiter read aloud. "All human FTL technology is to be confiscated within 1 standard year. All human colonies beyond your home system are to be evacuated within 2 standard years. The Sol system is to be placed under permanent quarantine." Elena could not breathe. She could not think. She could only stand there as her entire species' future crumbled around her. "The reasons for this decision are as follows," Velketh continued with no emotion in his voice. "First, humanity displays persistent psychological instability. Your species has engaged in organized warfare against itself over 4,000 times in your recorded history. No other species in Council records has shown such consistent self-destructive behavior." The Krellian delegate rumbled in agreement, and several other representatives nodded their alien heads. "Second, humanity demonstrates troubling biological adaptability. You survive in temperature ranges that would kill most species. You recover from injuries that would be fatal to others. You breed at rates that alarm our demographic analysts. You are, in simple terms, an invasive organism." Elena's hands curled into fists at her sides, but she said nothing. "Third and most concerning," the Arbiter said, "humanity refuses to abandon primitive emotional constructs that more evolved species eliminated long ago. You still practice vengeance. You still pursue personal ambition above collective good. You still cling to pride and anger and hatred as though these were virtues." He paused and looked directly at Elena with something that might have been pity. "We do not hate humanity, Ambassador. We simply recognize what you are. You are a young and dangerous species that is not ready for the stars. Perhaps in another 10,000 years, you will evolve beyond these limitations. Until then, you must remain contained for the safety of all." Elena finally found her voice, and it came out steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "I request the right to address the Council," she said. Denied, Velkith replied. The decision is final and not subject to appeal. And then something changed in Elena's face. The fear melted away, the anger cooled, and what replaced them was something that made several delegates lean back in sudden unease. She smiled. The chamber's translation AI flagged the expression immediately, broadcasting a warning to all delegates. Human facial display indicates threat. Recommend caution. You know what? Elena said, and her voice was calm now, almost pleasant. I think I understand. You looked at us and saw something that scared you. You saw a species that would not bow, that would not beg, that would not wait quietly in the corner until you decided we were worthy. She began to walk toward the exit, and not a single delegate moved to stop her. You should have told us 43 years ago, she called back over her shoulder. We might have cared then. We might have been hurt. We might have tried to change your minds. She reached the massive doors of the chamber and turned back one final time. But 43 years is a long time, counselors. Long enough to learn that you would never accept us. Long enough to prepare. Long enough to stop needing your approval. The door slid open before her. Good luck with your quarantine, she said, and that smile grew wider. You are going to need it. Then she was gone, and the chamber erupted in confused chatter. What did she mean by that? The delegates asked each other. What could one small species possibly do against the combined might of the Galactic Council? They would learn soon enough. 6 hours later, and 17 light-years away, General Marcus Chen sat in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. The message from Elena arrived on a channel that officially did not exist, using encryption that humanity had told the Council they could not break. He read it twice, then stood and walked to the massive blast doors at the end of the corridor. 2 soldiers in unmarked uniforms saluted as he approached, and the doors slid open to reveal an elevator that descended into the true heart of Earth's power. The room below was filled with men and women from every nation, all of them waiting in tense silence. These were the leaders who really ran humanity, the ones who had never trusted the Council's promises, the ones who had spent 43 years preparing for exactly this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Chan said, and his voice carried through the vast underground space. The Council has made their decision. They have chosen to reject us, to quarantine us, to treat us like animals to be caged. He paused and looked at each face in turn. I have 2 words for you, he said. Prometheus is go. The room exploded into motion. Orders flew across secured channels. Hidden facilities received activation codes. And across the Earth and throughout the solar system, humanity began to reveal what it had truly been doing for the last 4 decades. The Council thought they knew humanity. They thought they understood the species they had judged and condemned. They thought they were dealing with frightened children who would cry and beg for mercy. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. 6 months passed after the Council's verdict, and Rear Admiral Tyvan of the Moravsky led his enforcement fleet toward the Sol system with complete confidence. 200 warships followed his flagship, more than enough to handle 1 primitive species. The Moravsky had maintained galactic peace for 11,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed resistant species, and enforced the Council's will without fail. Tyvan himself had commanded 47 pacification operations against species that refused to accept their place. Humans would be no different, he told himself as his fleet crossed into Sol's outer reaches. They would cry and protest and eventually submit, just like all the others before them. Admiral, his sensor officer called out, I am detecting no human vessels in the outer system. Their stations appear abandoned. There are no energy signatures anywhere. Tyvan's mandibles clicked in confusion. This was not what he expected. Where was their fleet, their defenses, their desperate attempt to negotiate? They must be hiding near their homeworld, he decided. All ships, proceed toward Earth. Maintain defensive formation. The fleet moved inward, passing the orbit of the frozen outer planets. Still nothing. The humans seem to have vanished completely. Perhaps they have already accepted their fate, Tyvan's second-in-command suggested. Perhaps they are simply waiting for us to arrive so they can surrender. Tyvan wanted to believe this, but something felt wrong. His species had evolved as hunters, and his instincts were screaming that he was walking into a trap. They'd passed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus, and still the space around them remained empty and silent. Then everything changed. "Admiral," the sensor officer screamed. "Contacts appearing everywhere. Thousands of them. They are coming from the asteroid fields, from behind the moons, from the darkness between planets." Tyvan stared at his display in disbelief as red dots bloomed across the screen like a spreading disease. Ships were appearing from places his sensors had sworn were empty, rising from hidden positions throughout the outer system. "How many?" he demanded. "Over 3,000 confirmed and still counting," the officer replied with terror in his voice. "Admiral, these are not civilian vessels. These are warships." The holographic display showed him what his fleet was facing, and Tyvan felt something he had never experienced before in his long career: true fear. The human ships were ugly by Council standards, all hard angles and brutal efficiency. They bristled with weapon systems that no provisional species should possess. Their hulls were thick with armor that made Moravti ships look fragile by comparison. A communication channel opened without permission, overriding his flagship's security systems as though they did not exist. A human female appeared on the screen. She wore a military uniform of dark blue with silver markings, and her eyes were cold with controlled anger. "Council Fleet, this is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the United Earthship Defiance," she announced. "You have entered sovereign human space without permission. You are ordered to halt immediately and await further instructions." Tyvan recovered enough to respond with the authority of his position. "Human vessel, I am Rear Admiral Tyvan of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. You are in violation of Resolution 7012. Stand down and prepare to be." "Let me stop you there, Admiral," Captain Tanaka interrupted, and there was something like amusement in her voice. "You seem to be confused about the situation. Allow me to explain." She leaned forward, and her smile was exactly like the one Ambassador Vance had worn in the council chamber. "You and the council made a mistake. You spent 43 years watching us, studying us, judging us. You thought you knew everything about humanity." She shook her head slowly. "You knew nothing. You saw only what we wanted you to see. You assumed we were showing you our true capabilities. We were not." On Tyvan's display, the human fleet finished surrounding his forces. They outnumbered him 15 to 1, and their ships radiated power that his sensors could barely measure. "We knew you would never accept us," Tanaka continued. "We knew from the very first day. So while we smiled and played the role of eager newcomers, we were building. In hidden shipyards beneath our oceans, in hollowed-out asteroids, in bases on moons you never bothered to scan." She gestured at the fleet around her. 3,000 ships, Admiral. Not converted freighters or retrofitted civilian craft. Purpose-built warships designed for one thing: war. Real war, not the police actions you call combat. Tyvan's second-in-command was already calculating their options, and every scenario ended the same way: total defeat. "What do you want?" Tyvan asked, and he hated how weak his voice sounded. "Today, I want you to listen," Tanaka replied. "Your fleet is about to be disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. We are going to show you something that the Council has forgotten in 11,000 years of easy dominance." The human ships opened fire, but not with the weapons Tyvan expected. Instead of destructive beams and missiles, they launched something else entirely. Every system on his flagship went dark at once. Engines died, weapons locked, life support switched to emergency backup. Across his fleet, 200 warships experienced the same instant shutdown. EMP weapons, his engineer gasped. Targeted electromagnetic pulses combined with some kind of cyber attic. They have completely disabled us without firing a single lethal shot. Tyven sat in the darkness of his crippled bridge and understood at last what the Council had done. They had not rejected a primitive species. They had kicked a sleeping predator and told it to stay down. Captain Tanaka's voice came through the emergency communication system. "We could destroy your entire fleet right now, Admiral. Every single ship, every single crew member. It would be easy. Our weapons are designed to kill things much tougher than you." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as steel. "But we are not murderers, and we are not conquerors. We are simply people who refuse to be caged. So you are going to take your fleet home. You are going to deliver a message to the Council." Tyven found his voice. "What message?" he asked. "Soul is closed," Tanaka declared. "This system, these worlds, these people, they are ours. Humanity does not recognize the Council's authority. Humanity does not accept quarantine. Humanity will not submit to species that treat us as less than equals." Her eyes burned with fierce determination. "Any ship that enters our system without permission will be destroyed. Any attempt to blockade us will be considered an act of war. Any attack on our colonies will be met with overwhelming retaliation." She leaned back in her chair. "The Council had 43 years to accept us as partners. That offer has expired. Now, if they want peace, they will have to earn it." The communication cut off, and Tyven sat in the dark silence of his ruined flagship. Around him, his crew worked frantically to restore minimal power, their confidence shattered beyond repair. One of his officers looked at him with desperation in her eyes. "Admiral, what do we do now?" Tyven stared at the viewport where human warships hung in formation, patient and terrible, waiting to see what he would choose. "We go home," he said quietly. "We go home and tell the Council what we have seen." He paused and added in a whisper meant only for himself, "And may the gods help us all, because I do not think these humans are finished with us yet." The Council chamber had never known such chaos. Delegates shouted over each other in a dozen languages, while High Arbiter Velkith demanded silence that would not come. "How is this possible?" the Krellian ambassador thundered, his stone fist cracking the table before him. "They were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to have nothing. Our surveillance was constant." The Voidborn representative flickered with distress. "We watched them for 43 years. Where did they hide an entire war fleet?" Velkith finally restored order by activating the chamber's emergency protocols, forcing all delegates into silence. "Director Cashful," he called to the shadows at the edge of the room, "you have led our intelligence division for 6 centuries. Explain to us how we failed so completely." An ancient Sithrani emerged from the darkness. His gray skin had faded to pale white with age, and his 4 eyes held the weight of terrible knowledge. "We did not fail, High Arbiter," he said slowly. "We were deceived. Deceived in a way that should have been impossible." He activated a holographic display that showed the timeline of human history. "We believed that first contact occurred in the year you call 2204, when our survey vessel discovered Earth. We believed humans were surprised by our arrival. We believed we controlled the relationship from the beginning." The display changed to show something that made several delegates gasp. "We were wrong about all of it." The new image showed a human facility hidden deep in the mountains of a place called Antarctica. The timestamp read 2089. 115 years before our survey ship arrived, humans intercepted our long-range communication signals. They had built radio telescopes powerful enough to detect transmissions between council worlds. They spent years decoding our languages, studying our technology, learning everything they could about galactic civilization. Velkith felt his heart freeze in his chest. They knew about us for over a century, he whispered. Not just knew about us, Director Cashful continued. They studied us. They analyzed our strengths and weaknesses. They created psychological profiles of every elder species. And most importantly, they prepared for the possibility that we would be hostile. The display showed document after document, plan after plan, all bearing the same classification code, Prometheus. The Prometheus Protocol was established in 2089, the same year they detected our signals. Its core assumption was simple. Any species capable of reaching the stars could potentially be a threat. They would hope for friendship, but they would prepare for war. The Moravsi delegate, whose species had just suffered humiliating defeat, spoke up with bitter anger. But we watched them. We had agents among them. We monitored their communications. How did they hide their preparations? Cashful pulled up a new set of images showing underwater facilities, asteroid bases, and installations on moons throughout the Sol system. They built their war infrastructure in places we never thought to look carefully, deep beneath their oceans where our sensors could not penetrate. Inside asteroids that appeared to be simple mining operations. On the dark sides of moons we dismissed as unimportant. He zoomed in on one particular base carved into the ice of a moon called Europa. This single facility constructed over 300 warships without our knowledge. We had a monitoring station less than 2 million kilometers away, and we detected nothing. How? Demanded the Krellian ambassador. Because they understood us better than we understood ourselves, Cashful admitted. They knew we were arrogant. They knew we would not look closely at a species we considered inferior. They used our own assumptions against us. He changed the display again, showing faces that several delegates recognized with growing horror. Our cultural exchange programs. We sent their students to our universities, believing we were civilizing them. In reality, those students were intelligence agents who mapped our military installations, copied our technology, and identified our vulnerabilities. The merchants. Someone gasped. Yes. Every human trade vessel that visited Council space was gathering data. They knew the patrol schedules of our defense fleets before we even assigned them. Velkith rose from his seat, his ancient body trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. You are telling me that for 43 years, while we debated whether to accept them, they were infiltrating every aspect of our civilization. Longer than that, High Arbiter. For 43 years while they sat in our waiting room. Yes. But for 62 years before that, while we did not even know they existed, they were already watching us. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Director Cashful continued with the worst revelation of all. There is more. We have discovered that humans did not only prepare military forces. They prepared their entire civilization for conflict. New images appeared showing Earth itself. Underground cities capable of housing millions, food production facilities buried deep in mountains, energy systems distributed across thousands of hidden locations. Every human child for the past century has been taught basic survival skills, emergency protocols, and the importance of what they call species resilience. They do not have a military. They are military. Every citizen is trained to resist, to survive, to fight. The Voidborn representative asked the question that everyone was thinking. Why? Why would any species go to such lengths? Why would they assume the worst about us? Cashful turned off the display and faced the council with an expression of grudging respect. Because of what they are. Humans evolved on a death world where everything tried to kill them. Disease, predators, natural disasters, even other humans. Survival required constant vigilance, constant adaptation, constant preparation for the worst. He spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. We looked at their history of warfare and called them unstable. They looked at that same history and saw proof that they could survive anything. We saw their distrust as a flaw. They see it as wisdom. "What do we do now?" Velkith asked, and for the first time in his long life, he sounded old and afraid. "I do not know," Cashful admitted. "We cannot defeat them with force. They have been preparing for that fight longer than most of us have been alive. We cannot starve them out. They have hidden resources throughout the galaxy. We cannot wait for them to weaken. Their population grows while ours stagnates." He looked at each delegate in turn. "Perhaps we should consider a possibility that the Council has never faced in 11,000 years. Perhaps we should consider that we made a mistake. Perhaps we should consider that humanity was right to distrust us and that we proved them right with Resolution 7012. The suggestion sparked immediate outrage, but Velkith raised his hand for silence. He stood alone at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the representatives of species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. "We created this enemy," he said quietly. "We took a species that only wanted acceptance and told them they were not worthy. We confirmed every fear they had about us. We proved that their paranoia was justified." He closed his eyes. "And now we will pay the price for our arrogance. I only hope that price is not the destruction of everything we have built." In the shadows, Director Cashful watched and knew that the High Arbiter was wrong. The price would indeed be everything. He had seen what humans could do when they felt threatened. The Council had no idea what was coming. 5 years after Resolution 7012, General Marcus Chun stood on the bridge of the Liberation Fleet's flagship and watched the planet Nexus Prime grow larger in the viewport. This was the heart of the Galactic Council's power, the world where they had ruled for 11,000 years. But the fleet that approached was not there to conquer. "General," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface. High Arbiter Velkith is requesting to negotiate." Chun nodded slowly. 5 years of watching the Council crumble had taught him patience. "Tell him I will meet him in the Concord Chamber, the same room where they condemned humanity." "It seems fitting." 3 hours later, Chun walked into the massive crystal chamber where Ambassador Alina Vance had received humanity's death sentence. The room looked different, now smaller somehow, less impressive. Or perhaps it was simply that Chun no longer felt intimidated by alien grandeur. High Arbiter Velkith waited alone at the center of the floor. His gray skin had faded to the color of old ash, and his 4 eyes held the exhaustion of a being who had watched everything he built fall apart. "General Chun," he said with a voice that barely rose above a whisper, "I never thought I would stand here asking a human for mercy." Chun approached until they stood face to face. "I am not here to give mercy or to demand punishment," he said calmly. "I am here to discuss the future." Velkith made a sound that might have been a laugh. "What future?" "The Council is broken. Half our member species have declared independence. The other half are too busy fighting each other to maintain order. The economy we built over millennia has collapsed. Everything is chaos." "Yes," Chun agreed. "And that chaos is partly our doing. We spread ideas that destabilized your control. We supported movements that challenged your authority. We gave hope to species you kept oppressed." He paused and looked directly into Velkith's ancient eyes. "But we did not fire the killing blow. You did that yourselves. The Council fell because it was built on a foundation of lies. When those lies were exposed, there was nothing left to hold it together." Velkith sank onto one of the platform seats that had once held the elder species delegates. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "Surely you have terms. Surely you want revenge for what we did to your species." Chun walked to the viewport that showed the city beyond, a city that had been the capital of galactic civilization and was now just another place, full of frightened beings waiting to learn their fate. "Our terms are simple," he said. "Dissolution of the Galactic Council in its current form. No more elder species, no more provisional members, no more hierarchies based on age or power." Velkith nodded slowly. This was expected. Second, recognition of the sovereignty of all species. No more forced integration, no more sterilization of incompatible worlds, no more barriers to advancement based on cultural judgments. "Agreed," Velkith said quietly. Third, establishment of a new compact and actual alliance of equals. Membership open to any species that accepts basic principles of cooperation. Decisions made through genuine consensus, not imposed from above. Chun turned back to face the High Arbiter. Fourth, trials for crimes against sentient species. Not show trials, not mass executions, but real justice. Those who ordered atrocities must face judgment. Velkith closed his 4 eyes. He knew that he himself would likely face such a trial. "And the 5th term?" he asked. "Nothing," Chun replied. Velkith's eyes snapped open in shock. "Nothing. No reparations. No territory. No tribute. No demands for resources or technology or vassalage." "Correct," Chun said. "Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy. We never did. All we ever wanted was to be treated as equals, to be respected, to be left alone to build our own future." He walked back to stand before Velkith. "That was always the goal. You could have given it to us 43 years ago, and none of this would have happened. We would have been partners, allies, friends." Velkith stared at the human general with something approaching wonder. "I do not understand," he admitted. "You have the power to take everything. Your fleets could crush what remains of our defenses. Your coalition could divide our territory among themselves. Why do you not?" Chun smiled, and unlike the threatening smiles of 5 years ago, this one held genuine warmth. "Because we are not you. You looked at us and saw dangerous animals who would destroy everything if given the chance. You were afraid that if we had power, we would use it the way you used yours." He shook his head. "But we do not want subjects. We want neighbors. We want partners. We want species who will argue with us, compete with us, challenge us, and occasionally share a drink with us." He extended his hand in the human gesture of peace. "We want friends, High Arbiter. Even you, if you can accept that you were wrong about us." Velkith looked at the extended hand for a long moment. In 11,000 years of galactic politics, he had never seen such a gesture. Enemies destroyed each other or submitted. There was no middle ground. But humans, it seemed, had created one. He reached out and took the general's hand. "Then let there be peace," he said. "And let us hope that the new compact can build something better than what came before." 20 years later, Ambassador Elena Vance, now elderly, but still sharp, stood in a new observation deck on a new space station. This structure orbited no planet. Instead, it floated at the exact center of what was once council space, a symbol of the new compact that had replaced the old order. Beside her stood a young Sithrani female named Velkara, the granddaughter of High Arbiter Velkith, who had died peacefully after his trial resulted in exile rather than execution. "Ambassador," Velkara asked softly, "may I ask you something personal?" Elena smiled at the young diplomat who'd become almost like a granddaughter to her. "Of course, child. What is it? When you walked out of the council chamber 43 years ago, were you afraid?" Elena watched through the viewport as a massive ship prepared for departure. It was the Horizon, the first joint species vessel designed to travel beyond the galaxy itself, to carry explorers from 100 different worlds toward the unknown. "Terrified," she admitted. "I had just watched my species condemned to eternal quarantine. I knew what was coming: war, death, uncertainty. I had no idea if we would survive. But you smiled, Velkara said. I have seen the recordings. You smiled at the council like you knew something they did not. Elena laughed softly. I smiled because I remembered something my grandmother told me when I was young. She said that humans do their best work when they are scared. That fear is not the opposite of courage. It is the fuel that makes courage possible. She put a wrinkled hand on the young Sithrani's shoulder. We have been scared since the first human looked up at the night sky and realized how small we were. Scared of the dark, of the unknown, of all the things that might destroy us. But we never let that fear stop us. We kept going anyway. The Horizon's engines began to glow as it prepared to jump toward Andromeda. That is what your grandfather never understood. He thought our fear made us dangerous, unstable, something to be contained. He did not realize that fear combined with hope and stubbornness and love creates something unstoppable. On the Horizon's hull, painted in 100 different languages from 100 different species, was a single word that humanity had taught the galaxy: forward. The ship accelerated, faster and faster, until it became a streak of light that disappeared into the darkness between galaxies. Elena watched it go with tears in her eyes. That is your answer, Velkara. I was afraid, but I smiled because I knew that fear would not defeat us. Nothing could. Not the council, not quarantine, not even the vast emptiness of space. She turned to face the young Sithrani. We are still afraid. We will always be afraid. But we will also always move forward, because that is what humans do. Velkara looked at the old ambassador with new understanding. And now you have taught the rest of us to do the same, she said softly. Elena smiled one last time. That was always the plan, child. Not to conquer, not to rule, just to show everyone that the darkness is not as scary as it seems, as long as you face it together. Around them, the station hummed with the activity of 100 species working side by side. The new compact was not perfect. It was messy, argumentative, chaotic. But it was alive, and it was growing, and it was reaching for the stars. The council had prohibited humanity. But humanity was done playing nice, and in the end, they had changed the galaxy not through conquest, but through courage. And that, Elena thought, as she watched another ship begin its journey into the unknown, was the most human victory of all.